Okay, so our story begins in the mid-1700s. To set the stage, you need to know that in Ireland, religion was, and still really is, everything. The church told the Irish who they could be friends with, where they could live, what school they went to, and also like who they could marry. If the church said jump, the Irish said, how high, Jesus? Back then, people in Ireland were either Protestant or Catholic. And as time went on and the country became independent, more people were Catholic and the Catholic Church got stronger. But no matter what religion you identify with, everyone agreed on one big thing. Society was going to hell in a handbasket. There was a crisis, and that crisis came in the form of corrupt women, or as the Irish called them, the quote, fallen woman, end quote. The phrase fallen woman was used to describe ladies who had lost their innocence and had fallen from the grace of God, just like the most famous fallen woman of all time, Eve. She ignored God's message and got us kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Like, never mind the men's part in this. Men were simply encouraged not to sin, but women were the sin. And the worst kind of fallen woman to them was the sex worker. And there was this paranoia at the time that sex work was on the rise. It was believed that any woman who had premarital sex or got pregnant out of wedlock would be on the fast track to selling her body and her soul. This is when a rich white lady shows up and decides that she's going to save these poor souls. She's going like full Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds. Lady Arabella Denny was born in 1707 with a silver spoon in her mouth. Her mom came from a wealthy family and her dad was the first Earl of County Kerry. So Lady Arabella was essentially like local royalty. Her life is essentially eat, pray, love, like she goes to spas, has dinner parties, and hangs out with her wealthy friends. And it's great, but I guess she was feeling like her life didn't really have much purpose. That is, until one day she reads an article about a place called the Foundling Hospital. Foundlings was the word used for babies who were abandoned, sometimes even killed because they were born out of wedlock, which was a major sin. So the Foundling Hospital was trying to address this very dark, I'm using quotations here, dark problem. But the real problem was conditions at this hospital were horrific. They just didn't have enough resources. When Lady Arabella reads this, she realizes, this is my philanthropist moment. She can actually create some meaningful change here. So she decided to go full extreme home makeover and set out to revamp the Foundling Hospital in a very big way. She was like, that guy Ty, move that bus! New hospital. Great. Not only did she completely renovate this hospital building, but she treated the staff like people. What a concept, huh? She made sure the nurses were paid properly and that the working conditions were actually good, not just enough to get by. All this proved that Lady Arabella was great at business and could get a job done. And her next project kind of fell right into her lap. While she was running the hospital, historians say that it's likely that she read letters from the mothers of those illegitimate children, aka the fallen woman we talked about earlier. And that's when Arabella had this light bulb moment that changed everything. Lady Arabella figures if she can get right to the source of the issue and rehab these fallen women, maybe there won't be so many foundlings and orphans that need hospitals. On June 11th, 1767, Lady Arabella and some other rich investors rented a house in the center of Dublin. They called it, quote, the Magdalene Asylum for Penitent Females, end quote. First of all, that name, Magdalene, if you don't know, it comes from the Bible. It's one of Jesus's BFFs, was Mary Magdalene. Some say that Mary was a sex worker. Then she literally found Jesus and reformed her life. Ask any Christian or Catholic walking down the street who Mary Magdalene is, and they will say the sex worker who washed Jesus's feet. but I'm about to ruin it for you. I'm sorry. Here's a little fun fact. You can tell them, like, there is literally nothing in the Bible that says Mary Magdalene was ever a sex worker. Sorry. I mean, go look. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so, but go look. I'm telling you. But it's a story people have told for centuries. The original idea behind this place was to be like a reformatory, a place where these fallen women could go and like restart their lives. These weren't just about sex workers, but quote, seduced and abandoned women who had been discarded by society for no longer being pure. But this was Ireland in the 1700s, so seduced and discarded was just as dirty as the word prostitute. So they lumped them all together. The idea was that these women would stay at the asylum for a couple of years while they learned a, quote, respectable profession. They could take up skills like knitting, embroidering, sewing, And while they weren't learning, they would be put to work, mostly doing laundry. Yeah, this is the laundry comes into place. It makes sense now. This laundry came from all sorts of places like local businesses, public schools, government departments, and even like the military. These places would pay the asylum for the laundry, which kept the lights on and like the food on the table for these women. Because of this, Lady Arabella's facility became known as the Magdalene Laundry. Makes sense. It's like when you hear the movie title in the movie, After its success, more Magdalene laundries opened up in places like the United Kingdom, Europe, Australia, and Ireland. And it was clear the laundries were really onto something. And to be fair, at the beginning, they truly tried to help these fallen women. Originally, women even checked themselves into the Magdalene Laundry. It was their choice. It seemed like a good opportunity for like a new start. If a woman was a sex worker and she wanted out, there was finally a path forward. So it's like great, But then tragedy strikes and the laundries, they take a sharp left into Funky Town. From 1845 to 1852, Ireland experienced the Great Famine, aka the Potato Famine, where about 1 million people died of starvation and another million left the country, and it reshaped Ireland forever. And during this time, the people were in desperate need of some kind of like leadership, some guidance, someone in charge. And who do people turn to when it feels like the end of the world? This was a hard time for everyone, and philanthropists couldn't raise enough money to keep running these Magdalene laundries. So the Catholic Church steps in and decides to take over. And instead of running them as a charity, they would now be a for-profit business moving forward. At a certain point, they realized they had a cash cow on their hands. Somebody's like, hey, if there are more women in these laundries, we could wash more laundry and make more money. Plus, save more souls. It would be a win-win-win for the church, the government, and society. Except for the women, of course. But who gives a shit about them? By the late 1800s, there were about 41 Magdalene laundries in Ireland alone, run by different nuns and different Catholic groups. And women weren't going there voluntarily anymore. Nay. By the 1920s and 30s, the Irish government and families were now sending women and young girls to the Magdalene laundries, usually against their will. This included women from psychiatric institutions and jails, and even women with special needs. And something I found so screwed up is that women were also sent there because the women, were sexually assaulted. Yeah, it was their problem that they were sexually assaulted. One survivor, a woman named Martha Cooney, was raped by a family member when she was only 14. She was obviously traumatized and shared that this happened to her with her cousin, who she thought she could trust. That cousin ratted her out to the whole family, and the next day, Martha was sent to the laundries. This is the kind of story that actually inspired a famous movie called The Magdalene Sisters. 10 out of 10, recommend. The laundry became a place for parents to send their problem children. They would send their unmarried daughters who had gotten pregnant before marriage. Basically, this was a way for them to, like, hide them. Can't let the neighbors know about Eileen's little secret, you know? These parents relied on the word of the church, who made them believe they had no choice. The state did not provide any support for those poor girls. And then a major thing happened that sealed the fate of the Magdalene Laundries forever.